Welcome to episode 6 of this series on St. Matthew's Gospel. I'm reading from the Word on Fire, a Word on Fire Bible, and it comes with commentary from Bishop Robert Barron, who's the founder of Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. We're reading chapter 5 of St. Matthew's Gospel. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain. After he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come to not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your hand, by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also a 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbour and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, and as your heavenly Father is perfect. Bishop Barron writes on becoming salt and light. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus compares his disciples to salt and light. Notice that these two realities exist not for themselves, but for something else. In Jesus' time, salt was not valued for itself, but for the way it preserved meat and enhanced the flavour of other foods. Similarly, light isn't meant for itself, rather we see things by it. In our rather privatised culture, we tend to think of religion as something for ourselves, but on the biblical reading, religiosity is like salt and light. It is meant not for oneself, but for others. Perhaps we can bring these two images together by saying that we find salvation for ourselves precisely in the measure that we bring God's life to others. Followers of Jesus are meant to be salt, which effectively preserves what is best in the society around them. And they are also light by which people around them come to see what is worth seeing. By the very quality and integrity of our lives, we shed light, illumining what is beautiful and revealing what is ugly. The implication is that without vibrant Christians, the world is a much worse place. And again he writes, and the heading is Unpacking Jesus' Greatest Sermon. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, recounted in Matthew 5-7, is perhaps the most famous sermon ever preached. We read in the first verse that when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. This is important. We might pass over these minor actions, but through them, Jesus is symbolically establishing himself as the new Moses. In the Old Testament, we find Moses, the great teacher, going up a mountain to receive the law, and then coming down to teach it. Similarly, Jesus goes up a mountain and sits down to teach. However, Jesus is not receiving a law, he is giving one. During his sermon, we hear, "You have heard that it was said, but I say," which reveals that Jesus has authority even over the Torah, which Jesus held, above all, as sacred. To be clear, Jesus is not speaking as an anti-Moses, but as a new Moses. The law is not being abrogated, it's being intensified, raised to a new pitch. The Old Testament law was always meant to bring humanity in line with divinity in the beginning. This alignment was at a fairly basic level. But now that the definitive Moses has appeared, the alignment is becoming absolute, radical, and complete. Jesus declares that he would not undermine the law and the prophets, but fulfill them. Jesus himself was an observant Jew, and the themes and images of the Holy Scriptures were elemental for him. But what is he going to fulfill? Theologian N.T. Wright has pointed out that the Old Testament is essentially an unfinished symphony, a drama without a climax. It is the articulation of a hope, a dream, a longing, but without a realization of that hope, without a satisfaction of that longing. Israel knew itself to be the people with the definite mission to become holy and thereby to render the world holy. But instead, Israel fell into greater and greater sins, and instead of being the catalyst for the conversion of the world was continually overwhelming and enslaving Israel. And then came Jesus, who turned out to be, in the most unexpected way, the fulfillment of the dream. From the beginning of his ministry, Jesus effected the gathering of the tribes of Israel through conversion and the forgiveness of sins. Thus, as the fulfillment of Israel's entire story, he begins his primary teaching with the Beatitudes in Matthew 5, 3-11, a title that stems from the Latin meaning happiness or blessedness. Through this series of paradoxes, surprises, and reversals, Jesus begins setting a topsy-turvy universe right. How should we understand them? A key is the word blessed or happy or perhaps even lucky, which is used to start each of the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. We might say, how lucky you are if you are not addicted to material things. Here Jesus is telling us how to realize our deepest desire, which is the desire for good, not for passing things that only bring temporary comfort. Blessed are those who mourn. We might interpret it this way. How lucky you are if you're not addicted to good feelings. Doing the will of God sometimes involves the acceptance of enormous pain, but when you're free of dependence on good feelings, you're liberated for whatever life demands. Blessed are the meek. One of the greatest seductions is power. But what we ought to do is eschew worldly power so that the power of the will of God might reign in us. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. In other words, how lucky you are if you are not addicted to the approval of others. Later in his sermon, Jesus teaches, you have heard that it was said in those ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or a sister, you will be liable to judgment. Killing is an action, but that action is rooted in a more fundamental dysfunction, a hateful attitude, a disordered soul, a basic misperception of reality. To be like God utterly, we obviously have to eliminate cruel and hateful actions. But we have to go deeper, eliminating cruel and hateful thoughts and attitudes as well. For God is love, right through. And his final commentary on this chapter of Matthew is headed How to Love Your Enemies. And it principally relates to chapter 5, 43 to 48. The Sermon on the Mount is one of the most puzzling texts in the New Testament, especially the part about loving our enemies, not tolerating them or vaguely accepting them, but loving them. This is one of Christianity's most distinctive teachings. How do we make sense of it? When you love those who hate you, you confuse and confound them, taking away the very energy that feeds their hatred. We want God to behave as we would. That is to say, to withdraw his love from those who don't deserve it, and to give his love to those who do deserve it. But this is just not the way God operates. Why should you pray for someone who is persecuting you? Why shouldn't you be allowed at least to answer him in kind, an eye for an eye? Because God doesn't operate that way, and you are being drawn into the divine life. Why should you turn the other cheek to someone who has struck you? Because it's practical? No, because that's the way God operates, and you're being called into the divine life. Why should you go beyond simply loving those who love you? Because that's the way God operates. He loves the saints, and he loves the worst of sinners. Is any of this easy to do? No, of course not. Are we able to get to this state through willing it, through earnest practice? Of course not. That's why love is referred to as a theological virtue. It's the sheerest participation in the divine life and can only come from God. But God does offer this gift to us when we ask for it in prayer. Thank you for listening to this rather imperfect reading of chapter 5.